Welcome to Pet Biz People, where pet pros come to grow.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode. This week, we are honored to have Natalie Hoop. She is with Hoop Strategy and Consulting, and we're so excited to have her. And I'm going to have Natalie tell us a little bit about herself and her business. And welcome, Natalie. So go for it.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me, everyone. As Jessica said, my name's Natalie. I have a consulting practice, which is a fractional COO. And I come in when your company is dealing with two specific problems. The first is either you do not have an operational foundation, so everything is very manual. It takes a lot of the owner's time, and you are just doing the same process over and over again. So I come in, build out the processes, automate it, and streamline it. I also do that for companies who are experiencing rapid sales or growth, and the team starts getting burnt out. So I remove a lot of unnecessary items that end up on everyone's plate that can be automated, streamlined, think AI. And so that is, a little bit about me. I'm also a mom. I have a 14-year-old son, and I'm a pet mom. So I have one wonderful rescue dog and two rescue cats. And that's a little bit about me.
Well, thanks.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, Natalie, for being here. This is great. And you use one of those buzzwords now, fractional. Can you just take us through, what that means, but more importantly, why someone brings in a fractional opposed to sort of hiring someone to come in work full time?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know it sounds very buzzwordy, but honestly, the term fractional has been around for decades. It is absolutely picking up stream, especially I would say after COVID. So the last couple of years, it's really kind of exploded. Why people choose a fractional, right? So a fractional is somebody who at some point has at least 10, if not more, years of experience in high strategy and execution for a company. So why would I bring somebody with all that experience in? It's because as a founder, you don't know what you don't know. So there is no founder, no business owner out there who is great at everything. So if you're great at sales, maybe you struggle with operations, and that's normal, right? And if you bring on a full-time employee, the whole purpose of doing that is you need to coach, train them, and tell them what to do. But if you don't know, then it's really not a good return on investment for you. If you bring in a fractional, we come in part-time. We are a part-time member of your team, so we can lead team members, create strategy, and we physically will execute items for you, so you can actually move your company along at a much faster rate and at a fourth of the price of hiring a true COO for your company.
That's wow. The end is the key there, right? That you get a lot of this expertise. And what's interesting, we talk about this a lot with business owners, is that they're very scared a lot of times to talk about numbers and kind of get in front of someone like you who, people are worried about being judged, or they feel like you're going to ask questions they won't know the answers to, and then they'll be embarrassed, or they think they should know. I mean, what kind of advice would you give to, and you've worked with obviously different business owners, what advice would you give to them about that process that can make them feel a bit more at ease about it?
I would say that what that fear is really something that is internal for them because they believe they have to know everything as an owner.
Yep.
And that's just false. It's not true. I don't care if you were Bill Gates at some point. There's no way, there's no human way for you to be good at everything. That's why you have a team. And so it is expected that anybody who brings me on or any other fractional or consultant, we know that there's a gap and that you haven't been trained on it, you haven't been coached in it, no one's told you before. And that's why we like what we do, because we can come in and really support and help you to that point that you feel good again. And that makes us feel good again. And it's a win-win for both. So I want them not to know because it makes my impact bigger on them, and it makes me feel even better because I've just relieved or trained or coached them on something. And that brings us joy.
It kind of goes back to what you and I talk about, Matt, about how we teach or when we're coaching, we always tell them to focus on their zone of genius and hire out their their non-zone of genius. If I could talk English this week, but yeah, I mean that's amazing. You know what I mean? Focusing on your zone of genius, and it makes you happy, and you thrive off of your happy place, and it shows that you're happy doing your happy place. Now, if we could just teach our folks to focus on their happy place.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think, I was working with an owner recently who is an unbelievable salesperson. I mean, you get them in front of a client and just watching them kind of weave because they just have a natural ability to do that. But they're also one of the most disorganized owners I've ever seen. and that's okay. That's not their, and so you gave them software and gave them stuff to kind of organize it, and they were like every day they're like, oh my gosh, because that's not your strength. So you're trying to put a square into a circle constantly, and with that, Natalie, do you find that it takes you some time to get people to open up about what's really going on? Is that a process that's sort of like peeling the onion, or how do you found that?
Yeah, so I find that it goes into kind of two buckets. Either one, they're very self aware. Like I had a potential client meeting right before this podcast, and she was very much like you said, I am a salesperson. That is what I know. I do not like operations. I hate it. I can't, like, she was very well aware that that was her struggle and her opportunity in terms of needing somebody else to come in. The second kind of bucket I find with a lot of owners is they don't recognize it and they think it's something else. So, I talked with one business owner and they were adamant that they needed operation help. But when I finally peeled back the onion after 3 phone calls, it was not ops, it was sales. They needed a true part-time sales leader to come in, coach them, get them up to speed, and then create the playbooks so they can start hiring full-time, business BDRs. So it's usually one or the other. And again, it's a mix. And you don't know until, as you said, you peel that onion back if it's A or B.
I think that's a really good point, Ellie. That's actually a really important point. Is a lot of times people think that what the problem is not actually the problem at all. I think I was dealing with someone similar who thought they just couldn't hire the right people. Like they're saying the process kept bringing in the wrong people, and then they didn't work out. And so I looked at it, and what they had was they had a flawed training program and an onboarding program for these new people. So it wasn't that the people were wrong, is that they were setting them up for failure. And they just kept thinking, oh my gosh, we just are picking the wrong people. And I think that just being open, what you're saying is you have to sort of tell what's going on. You have to kind of open things up. So an expert like you can come in and say, you're wrong, right? Basically.
Well, you have to look at it like you're a doctor. If you're not honest about the symptoms and what's going on in your business, just like in your health, you're not going to get fixed. As my English again still is not there today. Your problems are not going to be solved because you're not being honest about what the problem is, or like your health, you're not being honest about what's going on inside. You're not going to get healthy. It's your business will not be healthy if you're not explaining to you what really is going on. And you kind of have to be almost a therapist in a way too, because you kind of got to look at them and listen to them as they're talking to you and kind of dig a little deeper in their layers.
It's really interesting that you're saying that, and I agree wholeheartedly. But I think one of the things we don't talk about is the cost of not being honest. The
Yes.
cost of how much time it takes for someone to dig in because you're not being upfront or telling everything. And at the end of the day, there is this like fallacy where business owners think like we want to come in and we want to get the biggest contract and, take them for as long as possible. The purpose of being a fractional person, the purpose of being a coach is that they should outgrow us and not need us. That is our expectation. In fractional world, we call it graduating. You graduate and no longer need our skills. So when you look at that, the longer it takes for me to peel back, the longer it takes for you to be honest, you are spending so much more money in my cost or any of the other fractionals cost. And you are losing money or margin or whatever your problem is because it's not being addressed. So the sooner they're okay with just like relieving their soul of all of their burdens and telling us everything, the quicker that relief and that transformation that both them and that company is going to get. And the cost savings is going to be huge.
I think that's a big point. I can tell a personal story. Early on, sort of, we got a government kind of grant to have a big coach come in. And they came in, and it was early on, and I was sort of waxing on about our business and all of this. And the coach looked at me and said, "That was great to meet that person, but can I actually meet the person who's running this business?" Because I was because they knew that I was trying to position it that I was further along or knew more than I knew or whatever version of it is. And it always stuck with me because exactly what you're saying. She was saying, "Hey, you've got me here. And if you want to kind of keep doing that, I can't help you. It's just going to take a lot longer." And anyone who's owned a business will tell you, anyone who's owned a business who says I had never made mistakes or, "Oh my God, what were the biggest mistakes I made?" They're lying. And so anyone who's a coach in front of you knows all those things. They know how hard it is. They know the mistakes you make. They know the things you put under the pillow that you don't want to talk about. And so I think it's really, the first step is obviously asking for a coach, but the second, which is even more important that you're talking about, is saying, "Hey, here it all is. What do you think?" And then, because I think you have to think as a coach too, is how do they think about things? How are they looking at it so that you can, because if you can't just come in and say, "Hey, I'm going to make you Natalie." Right? Because especially with what you do, you're going to be leaving. And that leads me to what I'm really excited about is this part that you're going to be working on with nonprofit groups with Pet Biz, which I think is a really exciting part. And I know you have a lot of experience in that space. Is there a difference of when you work with an owner in that space than maybe a traditional business space?
I think the biggest difference is in the nonprofit, there is this weird relationship between the head of the nonprofit, so executive director or founder, and their team. And part of it is based off of this. The biggest reason why people go to work or volunteer at a nonprofit is because they're passionate about the cause. They believe in it. So that passion is needed for the organization, but it leads to this false belief that just because they're passionate, they can execute or provide the assistance that the organization needs. On the flip side, the founder, the executive director, they know how passionate their volunteers are, and they tend to, I want to say, like, I don't want to say bow down to, but they tend to not actually like talk to them as a true employee, even if they're a volunteer, and say, "These are the expectations. This is what we need. These are our, goals and KPIs. This is what we need to do in order to succeed as a business," because they're just so happy that there's passion exists. But to your point about the onboarding, you're really setting up both the nonprofit and the volunteers and employees. You're setting them up for failure because you're not running it in a way that is operationally sound and structured as a business. And it also hurts your mission because you can't do as much because you are operating at much higher cost and you're not bringing in enough donations or what I'll call revenue to fulfill all the items you have on your mission.
I think that's so true. And I know Jessica does that to me because she loves our conversation so much. She never asked me to do anything. So we come out of it and I was like, she didn't give me any assignments. Perfect.
No, but you do give me assignments.
But I think that's a really salient point about that is that when people volunteer, even in traditional business where someone's helping someone out, you feel like you can't ask them for things, right? You think, oh my gosh, they're giving so much time. But it's actually, you have to look at it also from that they want to be valuable. They want to help you push it forward. And they want to feel like their worth is being used. I've had lots of people over the years, and being on boards or whatever, and people say, "Hey, you're not using me," right? Like I have things, and I think that's also really understanding who you have working with you. Like, what can they do? And do you find with that the structure that you're talking with nonprofit, which I think is so important, is some of that not having a clear idea of where they want to go? Like they come in with this kind of idea of this sort of bigger idea about helping, maybe it's rescues or whatever it is, but they don't say, hey, this is where I want this to be in a year or 2 years, or this is what I'm trying to achieve with this mission that I'm on.
Yeah, I really think so. I use this with all of the companies I work with, and I even coach, business owners and new fractionals, and I always call it your North Star.
Yeah.
Or where do you want to be in 1 year or 5 years? And you need to have that like really big goal. And then you need to figure out what steps you need to take that are reasonable, realistic to get there. So if you just say, I want to save 100% of all the dogs, that's great, but you need it to be a little bit more detailed. I want to get, let's say, New Jersey and have all the New Jersey shelters be no kill because we've been able to eliminate the need for space constraints because we are bringing in, we're like taking from the shelters, adopting out these dogs, taking care of it, and there's always room. Great. Okay. Wonderful. That's your big goal for 5 years from now. What is your first goal for year one? Is it we're going to work with one shelter? Is it we need to figure out how we're going to handle the fosters? What is it? And then build those numbers because it's a lot easier to figure out, again, I'm going to use rescues, that I want to save 100 dogs this year. How much money do I need for their medical bills on average? What help do we need to process these applications? What software do we need? What processes? And how many volunteers and employees we need to make this happen? And then you can reverse engineer your business plan. But it's so vague when you talk to them. They're just like, we really want to help animals. Okay, great. So vague. No one on your team will know what to focus on and what to build to get there.
That reminds me, I was going to say, that reminds me of that professor that went to his students and had a jar and he put in a bunch of rocks and said, yeah, it reminds me, he's like, is it full? And they're like, no. And then he put stones and sand and, pebbles and then water. And then he's like, now it's full. You've got to break it down from your big rocks to your small stones to your, then to your, your few tasks a day to get to that big rock every day. It's how I teach my students too. And I like that. It's the only way you're ever going to get it that done.
It is. And again, it's like the bite-sized pieces, right? Because again, if you hear that big, the big ball you're talking about, the big rocks, and you're like 100 dogs, and again, you're early on in the rescue, and you're like, last year we saved 5, your mind immediately, as anyone on the team, is going to go like, that's impossible. There's no way. But if you build this out, again, the whole business structure and the plan and knowing where you want to go, and you build the small goal of, we're going to get 10 volunteers in the next 60 days. We're going to get all the applications for them. We're going to get them trained up and ready so they can take a foster 3 months from now. Oh, great. Well, now I know I'm going to save 10 dogs that day, at that time. Okay, great. Now, and it feels more reasonable. It feels achievable. And again, it's something the team can all get behind and be like, oh yeah, we can make this work. We can do this. Yeah. And that
Yeah,
morale brings that passion back.
I tell my students if they get 2 tasks done a day, if they do that a month, that's 30 or 60 tasks done in a month. That is a huge. That's one of their small rocks. So if you think about it in a quarter, that'll be one of the big boulders that they're trying to get done. So they can accomplish at least 4 boulders a month or a year if they look at it that way.
And that's great. And I love the batching of it, of like, it doesn't have these big boulders. The small tasks add up to the big boulders. That being said, one of the things that I see a lot, and this is not just in nonprofits, this is in any business, is that these tasks that everyone is checking off do not push any levers forward and don't actually need to be done. So, for instance, again, I feel so bad because I keep bringing up this client I talked to like just recently. Okay, so I talked to that potential client this morning, and she said to me that her team right now is not taking notes on their calls with their customers. And, but why should they? And I said that to her. I mean, in a very nice way, obviously, but I was like, but why? Like, you have AI, use AI transcripts and just download it. They don't have to take the notes anymore. Record it. And she said, and she did say, oh no, I totally know. I told them to at least record it. But like, these are the things that are happening. Okay, great. Well, if they're not automatically recording it, then the next step is let's set up your operation. So when somebody gets on this call, it immediately kicks on the recording so you don't forget, because you can program that in. But these are the things, like, again, if you ask your sales team or your customer support team and all they do is take notes and then have to analyze them and then type them in, you're wasting their capacity on minutia that doesn't get you to that big boulder.
Correct.
And I think that that's a good point, Natalie, that the minutia becomes the importance of feeling like you're doing work or you're controlling, which is always a control mechanism to say, if they're doing that, there's things happening, then they're listening to what I want from them. Opposed to that, a thing of what you're talking about, which is what is it that you're trying to achieve? Where are you? Does that, what you're talking about, move that forward? And I actually find that a lot of owners do that, where they really micromanage in the wrong way of things that don't really matter, and don't micromanage on the things that really do matter. And I think that's a big part of it, of getting people to understand the tapestry of their business, to say, hey, this is the business that you're in, but you're acting like you're in this business. And so,
Yeah. I was just going to say, and it's also really important because it also knows who you need next or what systems you need next. Like, I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said for me, like, well, what's your goal for, if you're February 2020, 7, what is your goal? I said, my goal is to have a virtual executive assistant. Like, to have so much money that's coming in revenue in my business at that point, that my next step, because I've automated it and streamlined it, is I need an expert to come in and tell me, okay, as your EA, your scheduling's not right, let's fix this. This is wrong, let's adjust this. And then have them do the stuff that they're great at, so I can keep doing the stuff that I'm great at. And I think that that's the other part of, like, owners, for both nonprofit and business owners, is because they know they're good at doing their schedule doesn't mean they should be, or that's where they should be spending their time. And so hiring those experts, to actually take that over and take that on, to free you up for your zone of genius that Jessica was talking about, is huge.
yes, and we tend to float to the things that we like doing and move away from the things we don't want to do. And, I think that's very true with the staffing part that you're talking about, which is it's hard to lead in the right way, to set expectations in the right way. And I think especially in the nonprofit, where the room is filled to the brim with passion, right? And so how do you contain that into a singular, understandable goal? Because I think, as anyone who's owned a business will always know, that you as the business owner will think and care about it differently than anybody else who's in the room, even though the most passionate person. So you have to start there. And what would you say if you were going to give this 3 high-level tips from someone thinking about getting into the nonprofit space, what would be the 3 things you say? Here's the things I want you to think about before you make that first step.
Yeah, so the first is understanding the nonprofit structure. So, are you going to be a 501c3? What are you going to do? Your tax ID. I understand it's a lot of legality, and yes, you will probably hire somebody to do that paperwork and process and setup for you, but you have to understand what goes into it and have that knowledge so you know what you're creating from a baseline. The second thing is really understanding what your true mission is. Because again, I think a lot of people really go into this with very vague knowledge. I want to save dogs. I want to save cats. I want to, and that's great, but how? What are you going to do? What works for you? And then understand what you're trying to build. Are you going to change things? Are you going to pivot? Yes. But you have to have a starting off point instead of just kind of like jumping in without any type of plan and just being like, okay, what do I do next? And then I think the third is just realizing that there are, again, a ton of free resources out there, like workshops and blogs to read and whatnot, and start networking and meeting people so you can hear about their experiences and start learning more and more. Because unless you have already been in that type, I'm going to call it an industry, but if you have never been around rescuing dogs, even if you've fostered, but you suddenly decide you're going to create your own rescue group, that is vastly different than what you're seeing as a foster. And so, really talking and understanding what that is and having that knowledge is huge because then when you start going through things, you're like, oh, I'm not the only one. Oh, this is common. I'm going to need to solve this. Oh, this is not common. I need help. Like it allows you to kind of understand what's going on instead of, again, what we see from the outside, which is usually not what's really happening.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting about what you're saying there is what I call sort of the triangle of pillars. So here are the 3 pillars of my mission.
Mhm.
And I always say if that is not defined in what you're trying to do, then how do you make decisions about things that come up, people to hire? If you're going to go after a grant, which takes a lot of time, because I always say, let's look at your triangle, and does that fit in that? Because you don't do those things. Yes, you could decide that that's going to be added in, but so many owners, what they do is they go outside of that triangle because it either is exciting or interesting and what happens is it kind of just spreads them thin. And then you start looking at it and you go, I don't really know what you guys do, or I don't know what the mission here is, or I'm not sure what your goals are. And I think it's really an important one. I always say to people, find someone who doesn't know you well and explain to them what you're doing and see if they understand it. And if they don't, then you're probably not defined enough in what you do. And I used to do that all the time where I would pitch ideas to people in conversations or whatever just to hear their reaction. And because I would go, okay, in my mind, I haven't figured this out yet. I don't know really what I'm in my head I do, but I have Jessica looking at me going, I have no idea what he's talking about. What is this program that he wants to run? It makes no sense. It must be a Canadian thing or something. So I think that's a really important point that you make. And I think especially in the nonprofit where the goal becomes the thing like, oh, I could save, I can do this, and not really thinking about what is that mission to get there.
Yeah, and again, as I said, like things could evolve and change. You could decide that your mission is to, rescue 100 dogs. And then maybe you decide, right, that what is actually more needed is support, having your rescue support a shelter that already exists and you fostering with them through a program. And again, there's so many different options. And so you can evolve and change, but you also have to know why you're evolving and changing. And again, what the steps are, what are the 3 pillars, and why is that change happening? The thing about founders, the thing about business owners is most of business owners are called visionaries. There is an entrepreneur operating system called EOS that's been around for so many years. It's a great system, but the idea is there's usually the founder is the visionary. They have an idea, they know where they want to go. They see something that no one else can see. Great. But their zone of genius doesn't allow them to build the structure or the back end to actually execute that vision. And so I'm just saying that because what you were talking about, which is like, can you explain it? Can you talk about it? If you can't, then your team won't be able to build it. If you say something and they can't repeat it back, or they're still really lost and there is no alignment, that means that your team or your volunteers can't help you get there. And so that is something that everyone who is an owner needs to really understand and look at, is because just because you can see it, if you don't articulate it in a way that makes sense, no one else will be able to see it, and that is a dead end there as well.
And I think that what was really interesting about at that point, especially with people bringing in coaches and CFOs, one of the things I think people feel sometimes is, oh, because to be an entrepreneur, to be a business person, there is a bit of faith. Like you have to have that drive. And sometimes when you meet with coaches and whatever, they kind of tell you all the reasons it won't work, right? And people get discouraged by that. But I think the important point that you're saying is you don't have to know how you're going to get there exactly, but you have to know in your idea what it is you're doing and what is the mission in a clear way. And then you bring in people, either coaches or staff, or to get you there. And I think that's a fine point, because I know I've met with people, and everyone's done this, when you tell someone an idea and they tell you the 25 reasons why it's a stupid idea. Right, or you're going to lose your.
But there's that one way of getting there, though. You might hear the 25 reasons how dumb it is, but there's still that one way of getting there.
And I think the only time it collides is what you're saying is if you can't explain it, then they might be correct, because you're not being able to explain what you were trying to achieve. You don't have to know how to get there exactly, but you have to know where the destination is.
And and Jessica just like really brought up this good point, which is like a lot of times the reason why coaches or ops, especially operation people, like will tell you no, is not because we're trying to break you down. It's because we have part of our job is to eliminate risk for you.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to tell you all the potential kind of pain points you may feel, because it may not be the best path, but it doesn't mean you don't stop thinking about it. Usually when I talk to founders and I say, no, you can't do that, there's a regulation, or if you do that, this is a risk you're taking. It's the founder, the owner, the person you're coaching can still come back and say, oh, you know what? Now that I know that information, I want to adjust and tweak it, and this is what I'm going to do. And to Jessica's point, okay, then that's your way. Great. Yeah. Like that is the way now. And so that's why we're just trying to save you, again, cost, time, mental load of going down the wrong path without thinking about all the potential blocks that might happen.
And I think that's the core principle of pet biz, people, is the idea that we customize to the owner. Every owner has a different risk threshold. Every owner has a thing of saying, hey, I get what you're saying, but I can handle that along the way. And I think what you're saying is, hey, I'm just letting you see the road, the map, so that you can make the best informed decision for yourself. And I think a lot of times when they're sort of customized, and everyone's dealt with this with marketers, right, where you have a marketer come in and they've just taken another roadmap for another product and then put the pet thing over on it. I always joke, there's some pause, there's some really bad puns, and they think that will work. Where I've worked with owners where I can't, or a founder where if I suggested that to that owner, it would make no sense, but it totally makes sense for this owner, because they would take that information as what you said and say, I got it. I've tweaked it. I'm still going to the same place, but I understand what the holes I have to jump over.
Yeah. And again, knowledge is power. The goal is not to take that knowledge and be fearful, but if you truly have that vision, and to your point, Matthew, that leap of faith, because you cannot be a business owner and not have that leap of faith and believe that this is your path. It's just, again, that's you still need that. So then to your point, you can be like, no, I hear that and I'm okay with it. Or I hear that and I didn't think about it, so now I'm going to adjust. So again, it's not trying to instill fear in you. It's trying to get your brain as a founder to take that vision and say, do you need to tweak it?
Absolutely. And I think
Yeah.
that's an important part of the entrepreneurial brain, is that there is a sense of, I can get past that. You have to have that drive, because there is so many times, especially in the nonprofit space, where you're not having a traditional kind of revenue model. And so you have to kind of find the way that you're going to fund the business. You have to figure out the path that you're going to take. And that leads me, I'd love to get your thoughts, which is a really complicated one that all nonprofits have to deal with, is going for grants or through government funding or private, like, what's the kind of advice that you would give to people when they're sort of looking into that, abyss that everyone who's ever done it is sort of looks at and go, oh my God, I can't write another application. I can't do
Yeah.
it.
So the thing I will say, and I tell this to any business owner, nonprofit or not, is you have to diversify. And the biggest opportunity I have seen in nonprofits is they rely on a really big donor or they rely on grants, and something happens and they suddenly don't get it. And that is three-fourths of their budget for the entire upcoming year. So you have to have a structure set up. Yeah, grants. I do not write grants. I 100% tell my, clients to use true actual grant writers if you need help, right? But you have to do grants. You have to do small grassroots donors. You have to do big donors. You have to do death bequeathments. For high wealth individuals. There's a whole. You have to do at least one major fundraiser, if not two a year. Like, you have to diversify, and then that way, if something happens to one of those channels, it's only a small part of your income of I keep wanting to
Makes
say
sense.
revenue, but donations that come in for your nonprofit to run. Uh, I'll look at the United States. I mean, last year when the government changed a lot of the grant programs, so many nonprofits, came to me and we don't have anything anymore, or they just closed because they were so reliant on that one part of the donation structure.
I think the diversification of revenue, whether it's coming, I think I think that's a really important, especially in either nonprofit or traditional. I've worked with a lot of dog walking companies who are just, because dog walking is a very labor intensive
Mhm.
revenue stream, and they don't have any other services. And so they're on this hamster wheel. They just cannot get off of just giving them some relief. Also, if what happened with COVID with a lot of people is people didn't go to the office as much for 5 days a week. So all of a sudden that revenue stream changed dramatically, and they had no other levers to pull on. And I always explain it like a restaurant. A
Mhm.
restaurant is just sitting there in the neighborhood going, hope people see us, right? Or people know about us, because there's less ways to get people to come into that place. And if you only have one channel for people to come in, and I have lots of people in nonprofit where a lot of places that give money, or foundations or whatever, they reevaluate that every year, right? And you never know that suddenly that big grant that you were getting for 5 years could be gone. And
Yeah.
what have you had in the back of your mind planned for that? I think that's a really, really important point.
And I think it also connects well to the financial aspect. We talked at the beginning about knowing your numbers and understanding and getting and like numbers and like not being upfront. Like, I don't understand this. You have to at some point as a nonprofit or business owner, so you can budget and protect yourself from some of these dips that just naturally will come. To your point, like, no one saw COVID coming, it happened. Okay, how did it affect your, okay, great. You have savings, you have this, you have a protection, so you can do this. What do we tweak to get you through the rough time. And again, does that happen to everyone? Probably not. But most people who own a business or run a nonprofit experience that roller coaster ride where there's highs and lows and highs and lows. So you have to be able to like look at your business and say, I need my business to not only be great during the highs, but I need to sustain this business through the lows.
Yeah, and I've always said to people, I have these sort of the rule of three, sort of the three big things that you're always thinking about your business, that you're constantly trying to figure out, if this happens, what would you do? And then on a day to day, a lot of business saying, hey, what if two people don't show up tomorrow? And so that you're actively thinking about what your solutions are, opposed to reacting all the time. And I think a lot of times in businesses and in nonprofit, you're reacting constantly, opposed to, hey, if this happened, if we didn't get the grant, what are my three other avenues to make up that difference? So you're not, and that knowledge, when you talk about having knowledge, it allows you to make informed decisions. It allows you not to have that panic, that pit in your stomach that we all get when something goes sideways. As Jessica knows, when you own a pet service company, when you see your phone go off at 5 a.m, there's nothing good about that phone call. No one is calling and saying, I just let you know, Jessica, I'm really excited to come to work today. I just wanted to tell you early.
Nope, not even, never, ever have I gotten that phone call at 5:30 in the morning, ever.
Right.
And you're never surprised. Like, these are things that you were aware that could happen. And so and I think that getting that muscle of going, it's okay to think about the thing that could go wrong, or the devastation of not getting that grant. It actually creates a muscle so you can keep dealing with it. Because I say to people all the time, as you grow, these things grow with you. And so getting used to that is very important.
Yeah, and for people that are really positive and happy and upbeat people, you don't have to necessarily look at it at a negative side. You look at it at a plan B. I always need to have a plan B because this is my expectation and it's going to go this way, which is my plan A.
Yep.
But if something happened like this, I'm going to have a plan B. You know why? Because that is going to be relieve stress. It's going to relieve that anguish. It's going to relieve that whole panic that you feel when those emergency situations come up. So it's really like, I'm just going to have a plan B. That's all. I'm going to do plan A and a plan B.
That's what my wife says about me. She had a whole different path, and then I was plan B.
Aww.
But I think, I think that is. She'll enjoy when she sees it. She's nodding her head, obviously.
That cracks me up.
I think it's an important part to get used to that. Not uncomfortability, but that idea of going, there will be another day. I used to say to people all the time, when you do a lot of operation and you're doing a lot of services, there is always a solution, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the more and more you get used to that and thinking through it, then when those things happen, you'll find like the temperature gets lower each time, because you're like, I know how the pieces move around the board. I know I can get through this. It will not be a fun morning, and part of that paralysis that happens to a lot of people is because they don't want to think about it. It's almost like they think, if they think about what could go wrong or plan B, it will come, or they'll be stressed out about it. So I think that's a really important thing. It's not a negative.
Mm-hmm.
It's just saying, hey, that's the power of information that you were talking about before, of, okay, I've got in my mind what I'll do. Perfect.
Right.
Put it in my back pocket.
Yeah.
Sometimes plan B is the best option too, and you don't realize it. You know what I mean? Because you think plan A is the way you want to go, but plan B, you're giddy that it went the way it went.
Yeah. So one of the companies I worked for many years I was a multi-unit manager at Petco Animal Supplies. And, I remember one of the stores there, I walked in and there were opportunities with the groomers. And I looked at them and I realized this was not going to work. And I literally called up corporate and I said, I'm closing the salon down. I'm going to fire everyone, which was a hard thing to do. And I was like, but it needs to get done. And of course they were like panicked. They were like, are you sure that's the best option? Like, well, and I said, this it is worth losing that income right now to really get it to run with the right people, the right way. And no lie, 6 months later, that grooming salon was the number one in the region. And in addition, it the sales like increase and the market share that came in and the customer satisfaction was huge, and became a huge percentage of that store's business. And so I'm saying that because sometimes those plan Bs that no one wants to consider, oh, you got to shut down your business for a couple months, is a huge panic. But if it's the right move and you've planned it, you know what you're doing about it and how you're going to resolve it, it works out much better than you could have imagined. If we had kept going that way, we would have never been able to get the results we got. And the customers would not have stayed with us. Absolutely not.
Yeah, and I always say chasing the small dollars, right? Where you just feel like if I stop doing that or I change this part, I won't have that revenue coming in. But I always say the small dollars are the things that drag the business down,
Right.
because you get stuck on that wheel of not change, and friction creates innovation for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know
Very
we're
true.
getting almost to our end of our time, and I know, Natalie, that we're going to be having some webinars of people in the nonprofit where they can come and learn and get your insight. What would be just a quick thing of what would you say to people to join that? What would be the main reason to come and get your expertise and kind of hear about how you work in the space and what you can do for them in that space?
Yeah, so we're going to offer a couple different ones, and we'll go more in detail. So I highly recommend following the Pet Biz blogs and social media. But really, it's going to be again about small things that you can do immediately and take away that can help either your nonprofit or your business start building so it feels maintainable and sustainable. And so, again, it's going to vary depending on the workshop, but I think everyone, no matter if they're a business owner or nonprofit, they really need to take some of these resources to take that time back for themselves as an owner and actually use this to start thinking and planning and becoming proactive again, instead of that I'm working right now and just doing the firefighting.
That makes sense. And Jessica knows I always like to ask this question to every business owner before we leave is, what's the biggest mistake you've made building your own business, and what's the best thing you did building your own business?
Yeah, so for my own business, the biggest mistake I had was I went into the business acting like a W-2 employee instead of becoming the CEO of my own company. And it cost me money. It cost me like mental anguish. It cost me profit. And again, you don't know what you don't know. And so I went in thinking I was doing all of the things until that light bulb went up and said, oh, no, this is not how any major person that's a CEO would be running their business. This is why I'm struggling. So that was the biggest like learning for me. And what was the second
What's the best
question?
what's the best thing you did?
Yeah, the best thing I did, I got myself a coach. I got myself a coach.
And
That
we
was
didn't
the
pay her
thing I did.
for that.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Awesome.
true. I tell everyone, even if you're a coach, you need a coach because you need that person who can be that outside influence to talk you through some of the emotions or the struggles you're having. And, Matt, you said that, like, the people that, especially like in the pet biz, we've been there before. We've seen it. Like, whatever you throw at us, somebody on the team has seen it. And so having that coach be able to say like, oh, I was in that hole. I know exactly how we get you out of it. Here's my advice. Here's the structure. This is what we can do. It's huge.
Yes, I always say that's why we have gray hair. Right? We've been in the foxhole.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming today, and it was great having you. And we'll have to have you on again later on this year. And we look forward to your webinars. So thank you, Natalie. And bye, Matt. We'll see everybody next week.
Thanks for listening to Pet Biz People. If you love this episode, like, subscribe, share it with a friend, and add to your playlist. Find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere you love to listen. Want to be featured or ask a question? Email us at connect@petbizpeople.ca. And if you're ready to work together, book a call at petbizpeople.ca. We'd love to find the best fit for you. See you next time.